しい今日が来た昨日の次だみんなで体操深呼吸ぐるりと回って1、2の3
This looks a bit too familiar, like BOKUNATSU. Oh my god, you can do the butt-only alien dance. You can do the butt-only alien dance, and there's a dedicated button for it. 10 out of 10, Game of the Year! If you came here from my Boku no Natsuyasumi retrospectives, welcome back. If you didn't, welcome. Just a normal welcome. Hey, how you doing? You don't have to watch my retrospective videos to enjoy this one, so just sit back and relax if you want to, because today's game is all about relaxing after all. I'll have to admit though that I have no idea how to tackle this game. This isn't uncommon. I usually have difficulty with starting a script, but this time it is doubly difficult because today's game isn't just a spin-off to the eternally popular Shin-chan anime series, but also the spiritual successor to the Japanese exclusive Boku no Natsuyasumi series, which, since it's locked behind a giant language barrier, I don't blame anyone for not knowing about. So now I have to pick which side to tackle this from, and honestly, I'll probably tackle it from the more Boku side of things and make comparisons to those games when the time comes, because that's what I'm most familiar with. Which is not to say I am not familiar with Shin-chan, since I watched some of his most famous movies whenever they were recommended to me, so I do have some passing familiarity to those. Shout out to The Adult Empire Strikes Back, that one is definitely my favorite one. For those not familiar with Shin-chan, it started as a manga about a rude boy, a sort of rude and mischievous boy, and his slice-of-life misadventures before turning into an anime about a sort of rude boy and his slice-of-life misadventures before said anime got a dub in the West that was aimed at an older audience by making the comedy even raunchier, and then it sort of became an anime about a boy that is definitely rude, and this is how I think most Western audiences will know about it. And for those not familiar with Boku no Natsuyasumi, it is a calm, nostalgic sort of series of games where you play as a young boy that goes to different locations in rural Japan during his summer vacations. Not always the same boy, they're technically different boys, a boy per game, you know what I mean? And then he spends his days in a mostly down-to-earth way, playing with the local kids and catching bugs, while all sorts of more adult drama occasionally happened around him. So naturally, this game is about Shin-chan going on a summer vacation directed by the one and only, the GOAT, Kaz Ayabe himself, the creator of the Boku games. Man, I wish I could hire him to direct my vacations. Did I already said that one before? I hope not, that would be sort of embarrassing. But it's still true. It's not only that one man though, as Millennium Kitchen itself is also credited at the beginning of the game, though I do not know how many people who worked in the original games are still working there, but I'm really glad that they got this new chance to do what they do best and what I hope they love to do. Honestly, this game is sort of a perfect storm. Since Shin-chan is recognized outside of Japan, his brand increased the chances of localization, and since it's separate from the Boku IP, that I believe is currently owned by Sony, it managed to be released everywhere. Not only on PlayStation, but on the Switch and PC as well. In fact, the Switch was sort of like the main release for this game, the main platform. This is basically the best possible outcome, a dream come true in which a once incredibly obscure gem now has a chance to resonate with the maximum amount of people possible. Except maybe if it was a mobile title, but let's not get into that rabbit hole. Instead, let's just be happy that we finally reached the good ending of this franchise. But wait, don't leave yet, we still gotta talk about the actual game here. This was all the preamble, now we get into the real meat of things. Is Shin-chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, The Endless 7-Day Journey, holy cow, that title is a mouthful. Well, is it a true successor to the original Boku series? Or maybe a good entry point for those who never played those games? Well, allow me to try to tell you about that.
しかし父ちゃんがいない里帰りをしたら じいちゃんとばあちゃんは悲しみますな。
誤解される言い方するんじゃない。パパの九州出張に合わせて熊本に行くの。
The game, and yes, I will be referring to it as the game or this game because holy cow, have you seen that title? It begins with Shinosuke Nohara, the eponymous Shin-chan, joining his family, well, in the sense that he's part of the family and a very small child, so they're not gonna leave him behind, but well, he joins them for a train trip to visit a friend of the family that lives in the small town of Aso with the intuit of helping them run their small restaurant business and basically just enjoy summer vacation there. Before he even gets there, however, him and his family are approached by self-proclaimed mad scientist Dr. Akuno and given a camera that turns its pictures into drawings for them to test it out. If this kinds of scenes out of nowhere and you're wondering how it connects to the main plot, it doesn't. The camera is just an excuse to make cute drawings, and I'll explain that later. The actual plot of the story, true to the game's laid-back style, will only slowly be revealed over the course of the first 7 days, in which Dr. Akuno does some real mad science and brings back to life dinosaurs from the Jurassic Age to basically just wander around the town. And he does it with a silly dance, a dance so silly that when Shin-chan watches him do it in secret, it makes him so mad he decides to trap the poor kid inside of an endless 7-day summer vacation cycle for the rest of his life, thus setting up the rest of the game. I have to warn you though, that summary makes it seem like the game has a lot more plot than it actually does. The way it is structured is that in many days, but not all days, Shin-chan usually gets a task or has to talk to someone in the morning, and that task is directly related to the main story, and that task can last from 1 to about 5 minutes, at which point he is free to just do whatever he wants around town for the rest of the day, which, depending on how much you want to interact with each minigame, can take from 40 minutes to an hour for each day. And this whatever really is, well, whatever a kid does. He can catch bugs or fish or just wander around town doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, dinosaurs sometimes walk around you and you gotta be careful not to get stepped on, but overall, everybody is very chill about this whole dinosaur deal. And that is this game's whole real deal. Being chill, having a fun relaxing summer vacation on a rural setting. Do not let the Shin-chan license fool you. While some jokes and characters you might recognize are here, they are separated by vast stretches of absolute nothing. But the best possible nothing. A relaxing, fun kind of nothing. At the risk of sounding like a person saying that this game gives off Shin-chan movie vibes after only watching the Shin-chan movies, this really does feel as if someone took all of the whimsical and yet poignant parts of a good Shin-chan movie, cut it wide open before filling the gaps with a summer vacation simulator. That's pretty much the best way I can find to describe this game. Now, while I did say that each day can take from 40 minutes to an hour and that this is a very chill game, I do have to note that I said that thinking of the average player. Because of the unusual but extremely nice way this game handles moving the clock forward, you can actually speedrun your summer vacation while only hitting the critical points if you are so inclined, even though that is kind of missing the point. The way it works is that the clock doesn't move forward in real time, nor does it move for each action. Instead, it moves a little bit every time you change screens, because this game is made completely out of pre-rendered backgrounds, though I personally prefer to call them painted backgrounds. Every place is completely 2D, with moving between places usually coming with a complete change in perspective, and thus it is possible to rush the game by essentially just going back and forth between the same 2 screens, if you want to, for some reason. And man, those are definitely some backgrounds. Every single one of them could have been a painting in and of themselves. It doesn't matter if it is some grand vista or just a small back alley sort of area. Every single one of them makes every single corner of the town feel like a place you would just want to live in. And I mean that, like, yeah, I live under a bridge in there. It's freaking beautiful. I'm glad the BOKUNATSU series managed to get another entry of sorts in HD, because the scenery is definitely one of the series' strongest points. The characters themselves are 3D though, and while usually that would just be a normal thing for video games, I want to point out the effort they put into making them look like they came out of the Shin-chan anime. It is great. Just look at our protagonist's little cheek and how they took the effort of always making sure it is pointed at the right direction to capture the charm from the original artwork. It's just great. All of the character design is great, being unique enough that you can easily recognize every character at first glance, but simple enough to complement and integrate into the scenery while feeling like something actual real people would dress like in such a setting. Some moving parts, and most importantly, the insects and fish you can catch, as well as the fruits and herbs you can gather around, are also all in 3D. They pop out from the backgrounds enough for you to be able to know you can interact with them, but not so much that they break immersion. And this also helps quite a few of these rascals to stay relatively well hidden in the environment. It's not just about the art though, it's about the atmosphere. And that's where the audio comes in. There is music in this game, and very good music I might add. I especially love the dancing gyro theme, and I can just vibe to it for hours. In fact, let's vibe to it for a little bit right now. But we also have the sounds of nature, mostly cicadas because you just can't have an anime summer without cicadas. But it's amazing what the sounds of insects or the running water of a river in conjunction with a few 3D leaves floating in the breeze can do. The atmosphere is impeccable. It's a good vibes only zone that just lets you calmly appreciate what is going on around. It's amazing how thousands of game and a couple VR headsets later, it's still the little details that can actually make you feel like you are immersed in a fully realized world, even when most of it is technically static. Now is probably a good time though to go back to the camera Shin-chan gets in the beginning of the game. It turns pictures into drawings, and since he has a picture diary where he writes about what happens on every day of his vacation, you can already see where this is going. Whenever something interesting happens, you can open the diary from anywhere and watch as he writes what he thinks about what happened. It can be anything from finding a new bug to plot developments, and of course he writes whenever you complete an in-game objective, of which there are a list of this time around to help you hone in on all sorts of different activities you can do. He doesn't just write automatically though, you get to choose if he writes a fastball or a curveball, but in practice, you will 99% of the time pick the curveball. Because fastballs are just short texts with usually no personality, while curveballs offer more of his unique perspective to the events that unfolded. I really wish fastballs had their own different charm, or that maybe there was a third option to actually make me think about how to express each of the events, but as it stands though, curveballs are just too good to pick the other option, which makes this feels like a no-brainer. Another thing the picture book's used for though, beyond marking new discoveries or events, is that Shin-chan will sometimes take simple notes that count only as reminders for later, like, for example, if you examine a locked door, he will make a note about it to make sure you remember it. I honestly never use this feature as a reminder, but it's still useful because if he takes notes about an object he saw or a topic he talked about with someone, you can be damn sure that is going to be relevant later. On the other hand, if he does not take a note, then you can be sure it's just scenery and not something that is going to open up later. And let me tell you, there are plenty of doors to be opened up later in this game. The open world you get to play around here is very tiny, but it's simultaneously incredibly huge by virtue of you playing as a young boy exploring what feels like a big world to him. So every new area that is unlocked becomes a slew of brand new places to explore. Even a sequence of 10 or so backgrounds can feel like huge, vast swaths of exciting land to explore as they open up and connect to previous areas in all sorts of ways. It's pretty easy to get lost as different perspectives can make buildings you already know look very different depending on the angle, but you should definitely explore to your heart's content, as doing so allows you to learn how to exploit all sorts of shortcuts in order to save time getting where you need to be. And there are plenty of places where you need to be, mimicking the sad but true real life fact that you never really have the time to do everything you want to do, and this goes double here where you can do a lot of stuff. The most basic interactions you can have around the world are fishing and bug catching. They are a staple of any good summer vacation game for a reason. That reason being that you can do it, well, basically anywhere. Bugs are naturally everywhere in rural areas, but this one also has an abundance of rivers and lakes spread around, so you're never more than 3 screens away from a fishing spot. To catch a bug, all you need to do is use a net, but fishing is not much more complicated either, since all you need to do is throw a line, and if there's fish on the screen, they will automatically swim to the bait. After that, all you need to do is wait for a splash indicating that you need to perform some good old-fashioned bottle mashing, and then you catch it. Easy peasy. Coming up next in terms of sort of activities, but not really, are the newspaper and the errand running. You see, the father of Shin-chan's parents' friends, damn, that's one way to explain about him, I guess. Well, his name is Cap, and his job is running the local newspaper, and when Shin arrives in town with his special camera, he decides to give the kid a job as a junior reporter. What this translates to in gameplay is that you should visit him at least once every day so he can check out your picture book and put the best stories in the newspaper, paying you with pocket money for the amount and quality of the stories. As the papers get published, you also slowly build up subscriptions, and when you reach certain milestones, you get a bonus in the form of a dinosaur card. Don't worry about those right now. But there's also a side quest tied to this, in which the only other employee of the paper, a woman named Yoshiko, agrees to take Shin-chan on a playdate of sorts if he can get the paper's numbers up. So of course the little rascal readily agrees to help. The errands work in a similar way. Around town, the different shops have boards in their fronts with plants, vegetables and fish that you can hunt around town, and they'll give you some pocket money for bringing the right items, with a bonus every 5 items. They are not really minigames so much as incentives to get you to explore the town as much as possible, but damn it if they don't work. Befitting the setting and age of the protagonist, you can also go outside every night and visit your new neighbor of sorts, who is always telling a bedtime story to her children on the veranda, and you can sit there and listen. It's not interactive at all, but just listening to her voice as the wind blows and slightly sways the cuffs on the characters' shirts just serves to reinforce how cozy everything is. I'd rate this at a 10 out of 10 coziness scale for sure. Back on track though, there are a few more hands-on activities for you to engage in. There is a farm that is not immediately available but is open up soon enough, and there you can water some crops and come back later to pick them up. It's a bit more nuanced than just remembering to water them every day and making that part of your routine though, because if you just pick them up as soon as they appear, you will end up with normal or unripe vegetables, while waiting a little bit more will yield bigger, more ripe and valuable vegetables. You do need to turn in all types of vegetables for the errand running though, so you shouldn't aim just to get the most ripe ones, but instead try to get a little bit of everything. It's a bit more complex than it sounds at first, and I only managed to get the last vegetable I needed to unlock an objective on the very last free day of the game, cutting it real close, so be sure to experiment as much as possible with it. You might just be surprised with what you can get. The second playable activity you can engage in is being a DJ at the local cafe and bar of the town, the Dancing Jiro. And it is by far the weirdest activity in the game. You can basically play every track from the soundtrack, and then you can make quick cuts, quickly changing from one song to another, slow cuts, slowly changing from one song to the next, and finally you can just mash up both songs together like your favorite YouTubers do and hope for the best. You can even ask Jiro if you're mixing it up in a good way to get a seal of approval, but because mixing is so subjective, You can do little but follow little hearts on the screen that recommend which songs you should cut to and in which way until Jiro is satisfied. And then you don't need to interact with it ever again, except maybe as an in-game music player. It's a little bit bizarre compared to the rest of the game, to say the least. The final activity I want to talk about though, the one I saved for last because of how complex it is compared to the other ones, is dinosaur fighting. The mad scientist isn't good just at bringing dinosaurs back from the Jurassic era into the modern world, he's also good at machines, and thus he made a bunch of toy machines for the kids to play with in the form of fighting against one another. Combat is turn-based, and each turn you have to pick between rock, paper or scissors. If you win, you just deal damage to the enemy dinosaur and vice versa, but if you tie, you must pick a spot in a runny roulette to serve as the tiebreaker. But it goes beyond that, since each attack has its own attack value that determines how much damage it does, and at the same time they also have a charge value that shows how much using said attack will charge up your special attack meter. Once it's full, you can unleash a special unblockable attack for massive damage. Unless of course your opponent also uses his special, then you have to use a tiebreaker, but otherwise it's unblockable. And so, the strategizing begins. Should you risk using your strongest attack for massive damage even if you think there's a chance your opponent will pick the winning gesture? Or maybe you just spam a single attack type because you know that the winning gesture against that attack does little damage against you, allowing you to tank the hits to the end of the battle. All values slowly rise up as the battle goes on, making every single attack more deadly, so you have to take that into account as well. Adding another layer of depth is that before the battles you can choose a dinosaur card to enhance your abilities. You can get more of those by buying Chocobi at the local grocery shop. They come with a pack containing a single card each, and then you basically pray to the gacha gods that you get a powerful one. I got what I believe to be the single most powerful card right out of the bat thanks to my EX rank luck, but even that could not prepare me for the dinosaur tournament. If the DJ desk was the weirdest inclusion in terms of clarity, then the tournament is the weirdest part of the game in terms of tone, because here all of the comfort and coziness of the game gets thrown out of the window as you have to beat 4 increasingly very difficult battles against your opponents, and even with the strongest card available, I still struggled to the very end. When the time came for the second, even harder tournament, I had to retry multiple times as I cursed my luck, and when I finally beat it, I stayed in a state of constant anxiety for the rest of the in-game day as I waited for the night to finally fall, since the game only saves at night, praying that my electricity wouldn't suddenly go out and make me lose all of my progress. As you can imagine, this was a very different experience compared to anything else in the entire game. It is a very difficult and prolonged battle that doesn't really fit at first glance at all with the rest of the game. Thankfully, you don't have to beat it to progress in the game, but given that an area of the game is locked behind you winning at least one of the tournaments, I recommend showing up to the first one at the very least, since it is a much more reasonable challenge compared to the end game nightmare of the second one. It completely clashes with the rest of the game in tone, but I suppose it is fair to include it in the sense that some kids games, some games you played when you were kids, you know, can be fiercely competitive, and those can become precious memories themselves given enough time. You can't just go have all of this fun without paying attention to your hunger meter though, because yes, there is a hunger meter, and it makes no annoying sounds or flashes on the screen for once. So honestly, for the first few days I just forgot about it constantly, and I ended up fainting for hunger, but all it does is restart you back at the house. It didn't really seem to take much if any time at all, but still, it was inconvenient. So I finally figured the meta solution of just buying a rice ball and just waiting until your hunger meter is almost empty and then eating it, and then you have more than enough for the rest of the day. The true late game meta though is eating the Chocobi you get from wasting your money on the card gacha so you don't waste any extra money, but since all it does is refill a little bit of the hunger meter, it's kind of annoying to constantly have to open and close the inventory menu to use it. You pay for your convenience, I guess. It's about time though to get to the elephant in the room. Even though they're big, I can't think of a clever pun, so I'll just outright say that I would like to talk about the dinosaurs, because honestly, they don't do much. They just hang around in a very chill way. You have to avoid them in order not to be crushed, but if you are accidentally crushed, there's no need to worry about it because you'll just be teleported out of the way while Shin-chan comments on how cool the dino is. They are mostly there for plot reasons, but they do have a few gameplay functions that I will let you guys figure out yourselves when you play the game. And this does get into something that makes this game different compared to the previous games in the series that I reviewed, in the sense that those were Japan exclusive games available only in Japanese, so I didn't have to worry too much about how much I revealed about those games, because ultimately, chances are people who watch the videos would end up playing those games. But right here, right now, you can totally play this game, and I want you to play this game, so I can't just list everything the game has to offer like an amateur historian preserving data for posterity, especially when so much of the fun comes from exploring in this title. But if I don't talk about things, then we will run out of things to talk about pretty quickly. Simple how that works, huh? I would have just said that the game looks and sounds nice and that's it, so I did end up talking about a lot of things. All of those things were in the trailers, so I don't consider them spoilers personally, but I want to warn everyone watching this that now we are about to enter the BOKUNATSU zone. And if you didn't play the previous games or watch my other videos, things might stop making sense, so I would just like to add one final statement here. For people who are interested in this one title and nothing else. There's still a bunch of things that I deliberately left out of this video for you to find, and as always, watching a review is never the same as playing the game, and if you're in the fence about it, then I absolutely recommend you pick this game up. It is a great game, and if you're looking at an entry point into this franchise, this is definitely on the high end of it, and I recommend it to all fans of cozy games. Well, now we're going to move on into the BOKUNATSU zone, so I hope you watched the previous videos or play the games, or not. I'm not the boss of you, you can stay here and watch the rest if you want. The YouTube algorithm will love that. But anyway, it's time to answer the one simple question that will allow us to analyze this game in its entirety with one simple question. It's just one question. Is it better than the king, the goat, Boku no Natsuyasumi 2? Unfortunately, not for me. 2 is going to be particularly hard to dethrone, for me personally at least, because the inn was just a top tier setting. There were many ways in which it connected to different parts of the setting that unlocked as the game went on, and its layout was unique and fun to navigate. Not to mention all of the indoor places, from the neighborhood house to the doctor's clinic in that game that made it the BOKUNATSU game, I believe, with the most interior locations, and honestly, I like the interiors as much as I like the exteriors, so I'm still partial to that game. That's not to say you can't explore the house in Shin-chan, you can, and there are multiple exits that unlock with time as well as certain requirements, but the layout just isn't anywhere near as interesting as the inn's layout, and the exits don't go as far as 2, so it always feels like you're coming off the same starting point no matter what you do. They also unfortunately removed in this game a feature that was present since 2, and that is swimming. You can't swim in this game. I don't know why. I'd wager the Shin-chan designs had something to do with it, as it's already hard enough to keep them all doodly and cartoony in 3D without worrying about adding a full-on explorable 3D underwater world. But it's still sad that it's missing, since navigating those in the older games was a major source of exploration and shortcutting your way around the game world. You can't even slide down a slope like in 3, there's simply no full 3D to be found anywhere here in any capacity unless you count dinosaur battling, which is unfortunately not really all that interactive. There are no beetle battles either, even though beetle battles are a major source of youthful nostalgia in Japan, but maybe I'm wrong. The game does move forward in time a lot compared to the older entries, to the point one character has a flat screen TV and laptops are also present, and I don't know if kids in Japan nowadays have as many beetle battles as they did previously. I'm not Japanese after all. Maybe though they just didn't want to have overlap with dinosaur battles. Games like these are stretched for resources as they are already, and it isn't worth having the same thing in the same game twice. The plot here is fine. I can't say the plot of each Bokunatsu is award-winning or anything. It is more of a sparse series that is about player freedom, but it also had its more melancholic and dramatic moments without ever really delving into the super heavy territory. Depending on how heavy you think family drama is, of course. And I see what they try to do here by aligning it more with the wacky, fun side of Shin-chan. But honestly, the best Shin-chan movies had emotional moments stronger than anything on Bokunatsu, and it definitely would have helped to channel those moments into the game a little bit more. As it stands, there's definitely something poignant to be said about the plot. In particular, the way Dr. Akuno says everything is but a moment in time whenever he uses his time machine. I feel like given most of these games are basically time capsules of the older days preserved forever, and that Shin-chan hasn't grown up ever since his conception, with all of that, there's absolutely something here to be said about enjoying time but not getting too stuck into repeating the same days forever. But if there really is, then the game is just too afraid to delve too much into it. There is a suitably wacky conclusion to the whole affair that is actually quite fun, but I just wish, given the focus on the main plot this time around, that it tried a little bit more to make me connect and feel for the characters. On a side note, tank controls do return as an optional control scheme, and I should have used them more than I did because I did end up wasting a few slots of time because I changed the screen without meaning to, which is why tank controls exist in the first place, to account for the fixed camera angles. But it's also so little of a waste and the game is so chill that I didn't mind. If this game did have one objectively bad flaw, which I don't believe exists, but the closest to the one objectively bad flaw that this game has is that the dead zone setting of the analog stick is super fucky for no particular reason. And this being a Japanese port mainly focused on consoles, then of course, because of that, there is no dead zone setting for the analog stick, which sucks since that leads to zapping through the menus in a flash when you didn't intend to, and then fighting with the analog stick because my 360 controller ain't new either, and then you have to do that until you fix it, and then you have to remember to use the D-pad on the menus. And the reason why I think my old 360 controller isn't at fault here is because even when you fix this and you are sure everything is alright, sometimes the menu will just fuck itself up without you ever touching the analog stick, so yeah. But on the other hand, it's good that I had to reach such nitpicking heights to find a real deep flaw in it. Just remember the D-pad exists, kids, and you'll be fine. Overall though, I liked it more than the first game, which was still a little rough around the edges, and more than the third one as well. I like it more than Attack of the Friday Monsters and Bokura no Kazoku, which makes it sit at 3rd place on the Millennium Kitchen ranking. Overall, not bad at all. It's not really a bad game, honestly, at all. But I feel like the treasure map hunting plot of 4 is more compelling, and the setting of 2 is more pleasant, and the characters of 2 are also more pleasant overall, are also more fun to be around. So it's less that this is a bad game, and more that the other ones are just too good. And if you're still around here, even though you know nothing about Boku no Natsuyasumi, then yes, this is a perfect entry point. Buy the damn game. Honestly, it's so good, it might be my favorite game of 2022 so far. It doesn't do anything spectacular that will revolutionize the gaming industry, but rather it goes its own way, using old school adventure game conventions for its own purposes, with no intention of connecting or optimizing itself back into the grand Yggdrasil of gaming in any way, shape or form. And that in itself is an admirable quality I'd like to see more often. Or something. I don't know where I was going with this metaphor, but anyway, buy game. If you like comfy, if you like cozy, buy game. That's it. Thanks for watching to the very end. Later.
その恐竜は女の子でした。名前はエル。体の長さが人の10倍以上もあるとても大きな生き物です。若い女性らしく手足を大きな花びらや気の利いた美しいシダ類の枝で飾っていましたが、小型恐竜ラプトルには大きすぎると怖がられ、美しい羽毛恐竜たちには地味だと言われていたのです。なんてかわいそうなエルでしょう。ある日、まだ名前のついていない哺乳類の祖先が川に落ちて溺れていたので、エルがその長い首を伸ばして 彼を川から助けると、周りに仲間の恐竜たちが集まってきて、口々に彼女の長い首を褒めました。誰になって3つくらいいいところはあるものです。それ以来彼女はその長い首が目立つようにちょっぴり工夫して、大きな花びらや気の利いたシダ類の枝で飾るようにしたところ、ラプトルも羽毛恐竜も何も言わなくなりました。エルは自分に自信が持てました。なおこれは首を長くして待ちましょうというお話ではありません。彼女は遠い未来にプラキオサウルスと名付けられる恐竜の仲間です。どう？面白かった？もう一回読みますか？